Petra, and good afternoon. I am Christine Leong, representing the Malaysian Association of Canada. Today, we are very honored to have the opportunity to talk to Vicky Zhou, who is the author of Exploring the World While Being Asian, which is set to publish in August. We invited Vicky to talk to us today because of the recent rise in anti-Asian racism in North America. Vicky wrote this book as a form of activism to battle against the anti-Asian hate that is rising overwhelmingly since the start of the pandemic. With her writing and storytelling, she also hopes to paint interracial and intercultural relationships in a positive way and encourages her readers to choose compassion in more situations in life. Welcome, Vicky. How are you today?
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much. I'm very well, super excited about this conversation. How are you?
Not bad. I'm just excited to get this conversation started because it's really recent and relevant in our society today. So let's start from the top. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself with our audience?
Yes. Hello, everyone that are tuning in. My name is Vicky Zhou. I am the author of the upcoming book called Through My Eyes, Exploring the World While Being Asian. So my ethnicity background is I'm Chinese. And so I have just been exploring the world, visiting different parts of the world. And as I go, I documented my stories, perspective, and my thoughts about a lot of issues that have an impact on our Asian community in my book. So if you're interested, feel free to connect with me. I'm more than happy to chat more. And today I'm just more than excited to be in this conversation to speak to everyone.
Cool. So when and why did you come to Canada? So you're currently in Toronto, right?
Yes, I'm in downtown Toronto. So I came to Canada about 5 years ago. I came here for University of Toronto to get my bachelor degree. And I'm proud to say I graduated for a year now with a degree in social science. So I studied, thank you, sociology and political science with a minor in linguistics. But I just think Toronto has been a really great experience for me. Really got to meet a lot of amazing people, built fantastic friendships. So shout out to my Toronto peeps.
Cool. So I was reading your bio a little bit. You had spent some time in the UK and Colombia. So
Mhm.
what brought you there? What did you do over there?
Yeah, so for they were both very precious opportunities for me. For UK, I went for a gap year and I got an opportunity to teach Mandarin Chinese in a primary school. And so from there, I got to stay with different host families. They're from different cultural backgrounds. I was very lucky to be very accepted by their families and got to explore and experience a lot of different things with them. And in Colombia, it was actually during my university time. So I went with an international nonprofit organization called Isaac, and I went there to teach English, also with young children there. So I think my interests were just kind of like, involved with language teaching and kind of also involved with a lot of cultural exchanges. They have been absolutely fabulous. I mean, if we want to get into the story, you can read it in my book. I'm also excited to share more about it. But yeah, through those experiences, also I went to Poland as well to teach English. So those experiences really inform who I am today. And the reason why I want to write this book is really to showcase how, different cultures can get along very well as long as we focus on what we have in common and learn to appreciate and accept one another.
Amazing. Wow, that's some really rich experience that you have there. I'm a little envious. So you talked about the book. So let's start with the book. How did it come about? How long has it been in the making?
Yeah, so the book, I call it my quarantine baby because I have been working really hard on it for the past 1 year. I have been having these thoughts even prior to the pandemic, was that I wanted to document my stories about exploring to different parts of the world and meeting people from different cultural and religious backgrounds. That have been a very fascinating experience for me, and I always wanted to share with more people who read my book. But my also one of my biggest drive for really get this book written down was during the pandemic. sitting at home and just seeing how the world unfolds outside the window. We saw the Black Lives Matter movement in the summer, and then later on we saw the anti-Asian racism just kind of like roaring, and in North America and other parts of the world. I thought to myself, I wanted to write something. I wanted to make my contribution to what's going on in the world right now. So that was my final kind of hit, and be like, you know what, I'm going to sit down, take some time, do my self-reflection, and just write all my thoughts, all my stories in a book.
That's amazing. And I think you bring forth a really interesting perspective, being who you are and where you are during this time. So as we talk about anti-Asian racism, I want to focus on the word Asian, right? So as we know, Asia is the largest continent on Earth. It consists of 48 countries, from Japan in the east and Turkey to the west and Russia to the north. And so tell me, how do you feel about the term Asian as you focus on this topic in your book?
Great question, Christine. I feel like you made such a great point that our Asian community, sometimes we don't even realize ourselves, but a lot of people don't realize that we are a very diverse group. And I think in the Western eyes, especially here in North America, when we talk about Asian, the umbrella term, a lot of people only associate it with East Asian. So the typical Chinese, Korean, Japanese. However, as we know, we have it's a very diverse group. In Canada, about 30% are East Asian, 30% South Asian, so like Indian, Pakistanis. But there are also other Asian groups, such as the West Asians, the Southeast Asians. So our group within ourselves, the cultural, the languages, religious practices are very diverse. And I really hope by speaking up, by writing this book, I also help people to understand the fact that we are very diverse groups. And we'll get into that when we talk about a model minority myth, I believe. But in a lot of misconception believes that Asian people are this, unitary or monolithic group, which is untrue. And I hope by having more representation of our diversity, we'll be able to showcase the world how fascinating our differences are, but also how much commonalities we share with one another.
Yeah, I actually would like to invite our viewers to participate in this discussion. This is a conversation with myself and Vicky, so feel free to comment and chime in with your observations, your own experiences, and if you have any questions that you'd like Vicky to address, please do drop them in the comment section. Speaking of diversity, I want to pivot back a little bit about your experiences. So have you actually been to Malaysia? Seeing that this is Malaysian Association of Canada, I have to ask, have you been to Malaysia?
Yes. Hello to everyone, Malaysian friends. I was so lucky that when I was about 8 or 9 year old, I was very young, but I really had a chance that my parents took me on a trip to Malaysia. I think we went to Kuala Lumpur, which is the capital city of Malaysia. I have to say, because I went at a very young age, so I don't remember anything very specific about the country, but all I remember was my impression about the country, was the ambiance, the vibes of the country, was that people are just very friendly. And, it was really the friendly people, the tasty food, the beautiful, beautiful view, nature in a country that just really drew me in. And I would love to revisit another time. Now I have more Malaysian friends. So if you guys are ever there, please be my local tour guide. I would love to revisit. And yeah, I really do.
Do you remember much about the food though? Because Malaysians love to talk about the food. Was there anything that made an impression?
The food were just so much flavors. I remember we had some stew. We had this called, what is it called? It's the soup with kind of like a stew thing. Was it called laksa?
Laksa? Oh my God!
Laksa, is that it right?
It's like a curry noodle thing.
Yes, that was so amazing. And then we had a rice, but it's wrapped in like banana leaves. With like chicken legs and all this stuff. It was just it was very flavorful. Something about this
Yeah.
Malaysian cuisine. It's like a mix of different kind of cuisines in all in one. It's just different flavors that would just you just taste everything all at once. Just amazing.
Yeah, the rice dish is called nasi lemak. It literally means like fatty rice because it's cooked with coconut milk. That's why it's really fragrant, right? So, do you remember much about the community? Like, was there anything that struck you about the community when you were there?
What I was surprised was to see how many temples and for Buddhist practice, but there were also temples for Muslim practice. So that's what really surprised me, because being there at a young age, just seeing different things like that, I wouldn't necessarily have associated them all at once in my little imagination as an 8-year-old kid, but seeing the multiculturalism in Malaysia, I thought that was really great. It was such a great, it just opened my eyes and my mind, because where I'm from in China, I didn't had the fortune to see all that in one city at one place. You kind of have to go to different cities to see different,
right, it's more segregated.
Practices. Exactly. And also, segregated to different places, right? So seeing it all at once and seeing their people actually visibly looking different, getting along, walking the streets together, live together. I thought that was very eye-opening for me.
Amazing. Well, we're going to get back on diversity in Malaysia in a little bit. So I want to pivot now to talk about the whole anti-Asian hate crime. So just before the show, I was able to pull some stats. I read up some news pieces. So CBC actually reported that in a survey, more than 1,000 self-reported cases were reported since the start of the pandemic. So what's unique about this compared to the US is that a lot of Asians in Canada felt that racism has always been part of growing up here. So since the pandemic, the Asians felt that, we've been a scapegoat for this virus, right? Apparently, of those over 1,000 reported cases, 44% of that was reported in BC and 40% was reported in Ontario. And here's a staggering number. 60% of the people who reported these incidents were women. Yes. So, we've heard so much in the news about what's happening with this anti-Asian hate crime. And, we've seen that, all these cases are mostly in the US. And, now we're actually reading the news that might not be the case. So what has been your observation about this issue in Canada?
Right. I think I have to start off by addressing that a lot of times when we talk about anti-Asian racism or that kind of xenophobic sentiment against Asians, we only think about what happens in the US. That has been the predominant news or stories that we have seen in the public space. And a lot of times, because of the Canadian belief of multiculturalism, diversity, especially what we've seen in Toronto, that kind of blinded us to see how fundamental, how rooted racism, systemic racism is here in Canada. And let's take one step further. Let's talk about Asian community. I think historically, our stories, our perspectives or narratives have not been the center when we talk about racism in Canada. So I think a lot of times our voice are not being heard, it's not being recognized. And seeing this stats, I'm so glad that you brought up the specific numbers here, Christine, because that just really show how real and how serious the problem is. And that really helped folks to see that's something that we need to address. And it's very urgent. We have to do it right now. And when we talk about Asian women, I think there's an intersectionality here, because of the race being the minority race, and also gender being women, that already put women in a very more marginalized or more risky situations. And, just seeing what happened in Atlanta, the shooting targeting the majority Asian women. And here in Toronto too, I have heard a lot of local, spa owners, small business owners. A lot of them are Asian women, and they really told their stories about being discriminated, being mistreated, or being not treated as, as a human being, as a person.
Right.
So I just think we need to keep telling those stories, and we need to keep showing the world how serious this issue is impacting our community.
Right. In Forbes, actually. So, Winshi, we can actually. Oh, sorry. I have to introduce Winshi. Winshi is actually helping us behind the scene. You'll see her in a little bit. I'll bring her on screen. So, Winshi is actually going to help us by dropping the links to of the articles that I'm quoting these stats from, so you can check it out later. In Forbes, actually, with regards to this anti-Asian hate. Compared to the US, so they reported that 74% was the number as of March, year over year, was the increase of a report of anti-Asian hate incidents. So comparatively, in Vancouver itself, the number was 717% of increase of these incidents. And that was in year 2020. That was before the Atlanta incident. So yeah, those are some crazy numbers. We just don't hear much about it. We hear a lot of what's happening, south of the border here. So you mentioned, the 60% of the women who, 60% of people who reported this were women. So perhaps maybe we can touch on the model minority myth, and then, how does the angry Asian character come into place? So go for it, Vicky.
Yes, model minority myth. I always wanted to talk about it with folks because I think a lot of people internalize that within our Asian community. Also, some people kind of misperceive it as something that we should be proud of. But if we really dig into the history behind it and the intention of creating this concept of model minority, we should see how detrimental it is to our community and to allyship across people of color. So I will just back up a little bit to talk about the start, the origin of model minority myth. So it was created, the term was coined back in 1966 by a sociologist. I know that because I study sociology, so that's kind of like my realm here. So this guy, the sociologist called William Peterson, he wrote an article on the New York Times magazine. The article focused on the the Japanese American success story in the US. The argument is that because your family values, because you're very hardworking, the Japanese Americans were able to overcome racism, quote unquote, overcome racism in the US, and they were able to become very successful, wealthy, outdoing a lot of other people of colors. And specifically, he was comparing them to the Latino Americans and African Americans or Black Americans. So there are a couple of issues or flaws of this myth. I would just name two on top of my head. So one is the fact that it treats Asian groups, in that particular example, Asian American group, as one monolithic group, specifically, basically East Asian, treating Asians as all, East Asians who are perceived as, wealthy, rich, super rich Asians, which is completely not the case. As we know, here in Canada, there are also a lot of Asians from other parts of the Asia continent. Some of them fled to Canada as refugees. So their stories are not the same. Their trajectories in this country are in diaspora are not the same. And second of all, I would like to address model minority myth create this competition or this misunderstanding between people of color, because it's stating that, hey, basically pose the question that if Asian people were able to overcome racism by becoming so wealthy, so can other model minorities, so can other racialized minorities such as Black and Latino folks. So that just completely overlook the systemic racism that are particularly in place for those groups, because Asian Americans or Asian Canadians go through different kind of racism and discrimination compared to Black and brown folks. So we just need to acknowledge that. We need to see how there are so many flaws in this myth that is completely created from the eyes of the Western, from the white folks or white supremacy folks. So yes, we can talk so much about model minority myth, but I would just really like to highlight a few points here.
Yeah, you do make a good point, because I think the damage here about adopting the model minority myth is that it kind of paints us in a quote unquote positive light that just segregated us from, sections of the community and even amongst ourselves. How many times have we heard the comment, like, oh, I'm Asian, but I'm bad at math, or like, I'm an Asian fail because, I didn't end up being a doctor or or an engineer or whatever, right? So it's like, if you didn't fit the mold and all of a sudden you're not a model minority, so I think it is hurting us. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe you have an observation of the difference in the demographic of, who shapes the group of model minorities, right? Is it like the initial generations who migrated here are more open in adopting or becoming that model minority? What about the first and second generations of Asians who suddenly call North America their home? Have you thought about that?
I that's a really good question. I think I would answer as the whole model minority concept comes from the Western eyes. I think they perceive, so from that particular article, and then model minority kind of developed to expand it to also include other, like Indian Americans. So people who migrated from India, they also have very, overall, the group has a higher social economic status. So I think it's really through the eyes of the West that see Asians as, there are successful individuals. So this group must be very well off. They don't experience racism. They don't have any problems living in this society. Or, as I read in Kathy Park Hong's book, some people even called Asians as next in line to white people. So I don't think these it's hilarious, but I don't think model minority is genuinely coming from our experience, our narrative. That's why writing this book, I think, is so important to reclaim our narrative, to reclaim what it actually means to be Asians in Canada, in the US, in diaspora. I think coming from our perspective, that would be much more authentic, much more, our experience would be much more diverse, rather than being seen as model minority or having imposed a definition of what it means to be a model minority.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Now we're going to flow right into the term that you have used in your book, the angry Asian. What does that mean? Who are they? Why are they important?
Oh, they're so important. And a lot of angry Asian women, they're really my role models. So I kind of played on words on this term angry. By angry, I really tried to portray Asian folks who are outspoken, who are courageous, who stand up to wrongdoings, who stand up against racism or, to all the wrongdoings. So because the reason why I use the term angry and try to play it as a positive term is because just historically, I think Asian folks' voices have been silenced, and we haven't seen so many angry Asians in the public realm, especially Asian women, historically just being misperceived or stereotyped as, as docile, submissive, quiet, or even hypersexualized in a lot of, entertainment, movies, on media. So I just think angry Asian is something that I am trying to seek within myself, to be more outspoken, to be more out there, to battle against those stereotypes that were imposed on Asian women. And so just watching the news, in the U.S. news, how Kamala Harris, we all know that she's a proud half Asian vice president in the U.S. And her, for being outspoken, there were a lot of people perceive that as a threat, as something she's not supposed to be that loud. She's not supposed to be so outspoken. I just found that it just blew my mind. I think at this time, we need to see more Asian women in leadership, claiming our place in leadership, in authority place. So I think I need to see more angry Asian women. I need to see myself being that angry and kind of pushy, but just for raising my voice.
Yes, sister. I hear you.
Yes, sister.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely, hear you right there. And I notice, even in boardrooms and just, working with different organizations, like where is, the Asian women representation? So yeah, this is definitely a good point that you have raised. There's some amazing comments there that are flowing in. We're definitely going to get to them. There are a couple more questions that I'd like to ask you. And I just want to let you guys know we've been live for 25 minutes, and I know we only have 5 minutes left usually for this segment. We might go a little bit over. Hopefully, you guys will still stay with us as we take your comments and continue the discussion. I want to focus on intra-racism. Now, as you have observed when you went to Malaysia. So I want to bring this up because the term racism, how we perceive racism here and what we experience in a multicultural community like Malaysia is very different. It could be more, some could say, in the West it's more overt, right? In the East it's probably more covert. But you feel it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We definitely feel it. So what are your thoughts about intra racism? And behind the scenes, we had a conversation about you can share a bit of story about where you came from and how you've observed that.
Yeah, I think just to unpack the term that we talk about, inter-racism, to folks who are probably not so familiar with this idea. So inter just means it's from group to group, right? And the intra means within group. So I think the inter-racism, so for example, the racism against Asians coming from other outside minorities or other racial groups or other groups in the society, is that people attack Asians because they look Asians, because there's anti-Asian hate. But the intra-group racism, I think, is more complex because it's within the same group, people lack of understanding, or people simply focus on the differences that make them different and make them kind of hate on each other, fight against one another. So I want to say that within our Asian group, the intra-group racism, a lot of times it coming from we ourselves don't really understand one another that much. There's a lack of contact, lack of communication, lack of interaction within our Asian groups. As we talk about, Christine, like how diverse our Asian group is. And a lot of times I think within our Asian community, a lot of people still kind of lack of the understanding and interaction with one another. And and that's just based on a lot of different kind of discrimination, language, religious grounds, on a lot of things. And I think the term Asian Canadian is very young, very recent. It's only pretty much originated in Canada only for a few decades. So within ourselves, we still need to build this our identity as we are one group. We relate to one another. We should support, help out each other. So I think that would help with battling some intra-group racism here in Canada.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in your book the term allyship, right? So really joining hands in battling racism all together because it is illogical. At this point, I think I have a couple of questions that I can save to the end, but I do want to go to the comments, and I will cue Winshi to come on the scene with us as we navigate through the comments. Hi, Winshi.
Hey, Winshi.
Hi. So we got a lot of questions on our stream, so I'm just gonna queue them here so we can discuss together. So the first one we have is from James.
Hi, James.
So James said, I like the acknowledgement. Oh wait, sorry, wrong one. There's a generation difference. The older generation tend to prefer to take a more passive response to racism, quote unquote, to turn the other cheek. What are your thoughts on this, Vicky?
James, this is such a great question. I have conversation with my friends who are born and raised, or they grew up in Canada for most of their life. We talked about this a lot. And I believe for the elder generations, I think it comes to that we also have to understand for the elder generation who paved the way here in Canada who came here probably without so much fortune, without so much, understanding about what it's like being in a foreign country. For them to be out here being as a pioneer, we need to understand how much hardship they also go through, how much stuff they have to take in to battle, to fight in order to build a life for their younger generation. So I really understand them. I understand that it's passive response, as if they're not as proactive, not as out there to fight, to raise your
Not
voice,
as angry.
not as angry. But I also understand that I sympathize with that, because there's a lot of hardship, especially being the first generation here, to try to make a life for the future generation. So I think for intergeneration communication, we got to understand each other's point of view. But for elder generations, like our parents, our grandparents, I really hope they also understand our perspective as, we want to be more angry. We want to be more out there. We need to be part of the political change, the social change. We need to participate in protests, in demonstrations, in order to create a space for our community. And a lot of times I think the older generations would be like, why don't you just keep your head down? Don't rock the boat. Just do you. Just be well. Then you will be accepted by the society. But
don't cause trouble. I'm gonna teach you a term. Yeah, a term in Malaysia. Say don't kaka chow chow. Don't stir the pot.
Exactly.
Don't stir the pot.
Exactly. In Chinese term, it's the same too. Like 不要惹是生非, like don't cause troubles. Exactly. So that kind of mentality, we have to understand each other, and we have to kind of build a common ground because in the end of the day, it's really for the better for our own community.
Well, you mentioned politics, so Winchi, maybe we can cue Han's question there. Does Canadian multiculturalism work for Asians in Canada? This might be a tough one.
It is a tough one. I think by working for Asians, does it mean like, does it better the Asian community? Or I hope Galactus can kind of unpack this question a little bit more. But I do think overall, multiculturalism is working for the country. But I think this thing I have to emphasize is that by having multiculturalism, I hope it doesn't blind folks from also seeing racism does exist in Canada. Because a lot of times I feel like multiculturalism is kind of this term that just all in a sudden it just erase all the problems here in Canada because we're so multicultural. But it is not true. We still have, as we mentioned, intergroup racism. We still have to acknowledge them.
I think Hans has a follow-up question on like the bilingualism in Canada. Is that how is that impacting Asians?
I think that just goes back to, and also Christine and Winchi, feel free to also jump in if you guys have.
Yeah.
Also want to answer, because I also want to hear you guys' perspective.
Our perspective? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I will go first, and hopefully I can also hear you guys' answers as well. I'm very curious too. So I think, as we had the conversation earlier on, we talk about the diversity within our Asian groups, right? So it's here in Canada too. The diversity of the situation, the reality is that some Asians speak English because they live in Anglophone places, and some Asians they're Francophones. So by acknowledging that diversity, I don't think that necessarily create division, but it's just the fact that we have to realize that how diverse this group is, and we still have a lot in common. I think once we really focus on what we share in commonality, what really the fight is about, that will bring us together. It doesn't really matter what language we are speaking. That's my perspective.
I think where Hans might be speaking from, the only reason I think I know what he's talking about is because we have some chats behind the scenes.
Okay.
Is that so? I think he's speaking from a political perspective about how Asians can participate or probably excel in the political scene, whereby there's a requirement to be bilingual. So is this bilingualism policy, to be fluent in English and French, holding us back? I think most of us who have, migrated to this part of the world, we pick up English, but not necessarily both English and French. What does that mean? If we do want to be the real movers and shakers, making an impact in the laws of it.
I see.
We.
And that's okay. After you explain the question, it makes much more sense. Yes, I do. Yeah, totally. Thank you for unpacking that, Christine. I think, I do think that bilingualism kind of hinder on a lot of immigrants here, not just for Asians. A lot of immigrants here who, they were only they only picked up the English language, but in order to get the high-end jobs, government jobs, you also have to speak French. I think that just add on another layer on, hindering immigrants or Asian folks for getting into those space. And that is definitely a challenge for a lot of us, I believe.
And that is actually a flavor of racism. I mentioned this because I just completed my corporate anti-racism course yesterday, and I am much more informed now about,
tell us.
So that is a form of racism. People just don't think hard enough because it is holding us back. And I think the more we are aware, the more we talk about it, the better it is, because it starts from the ground up, and hopefully people are listening and agreeing with us and getting the gears started to move and ask questions. But we are receiving a lot of immigrants, right, in this country. So it's about representation. So if Asians aren't really contributing to the policies that we live and breathe every day, there isn't representation. So I think it does permeate, it perpetuates, right? So yay.
Yeah.
Get angry, people.
Our viewers, after leaving this session, everyone's gonna be like, what am I gonna do?
Be angry, but be compassionate. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Exactly. And also, not just being angry, is also to transfer and transform that anger into practical work. Like, as you said, Christine, putting ourselves into a political space where we can represent our Asian folks, or putting ourselves in a corporation space like yourself, Christine, to speak up for Asian women, for people who are like us or who are behind of us, our younger generation. So I think it's also about transforming that anger into practical work, not just sitting at home being like, I'm mad at everything.
Turn it into action.
So I do want to address something in the comments that came from Wan Wong Ascendi. She said that angry has the connotation of engaging in violence, but assertion is to speak out and stand up for ourselves. And so she prefers to be assertive. Vicky?
Yeah, I love that. I think anger is just more, it's sentimental. And a lot of times I think I encourage anger, but not, as we just talked about, it's for transforming into action, into practice, into, a more engaging long-term work. But it's definitely not to start any, not to create any violence. Definitely that's not what the term that I am referring to. And I think assertion is definitely, it's a great substitution for being angry. And I do think we do also need to be more assertive, more firm at what we want, what we pursue.
I think ultimately just really taking that energy and then turning into something that will make good.
The passion. So Henry has a question here. Racism arises from prejudice. How do you deal with prejudice among the Chinese diaspora from different parts of the world? So Vicky and Winshi, so just so you guys know, I'm what people call banana. So it's like, I think I would just divert these questions to Winshi and Vicky, who are, I guess, living and talking to more Chinese people on a daily basis.
Winshi, do you want to start off?
I'm not sure where I can begin with. Because I feel like I grew up with full of Chinese tradition, language. We speak Chinese mainly at home. Even right now, I speak mainly Chinese at here in Canada as well.
Canto?
Both.
Oh, you do.
The thing with Malaysians is that most of us we speak more than 3 languages.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
minimum
English,
2.
Mendo, Canto, or
Hakka,
Malay.
Taiwanese as well.
Okay.
Malay is our national language. Yeah. So, and then we have the mother tongue. So, like if you're Indian, you speak like either,
Dialects.
Tamil, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
I guess I can say that like I don't feel as Chinese until I came to Canada. Because I feel like when in back home you're more like, oh yeah, you're Malaysian, and then you eat like different food in the morning from like different cuisine, like the Indian food, Malay food, and all the others. And then when I come here, people see me more as like Chinese because of my look. They be like identify that something like I'm not associated to Malaysia until I tell them. Yeah, so it's a lot of like education I have like put into when I came here to like establish my identity.
I can chime in my experience just on the prejudice part. So I came to Canada in 1999, and I went to University of Windsor. So Winshi and I both went to University of Windsor, but decades later, right? Yeah. So when I came here, funnily, I've always identified as being Chinese, but from Malaysia. But I was not accepted by my Chinese friends. Could be Chinese from China, Chinese from Taiwan, or Chinese from Hong Kong. I was just seen as the lesser Chinese because I came from Malaysia. And I don't know if it's because my Cantonese sounded different, or my Mandarin sounded different, or I just don't look as fair as them. Is it a colorism thing? I never found out. I just straight up was rejected. So fast forward, I moved to Toronto. I live in a neighborhood whereby it's predominantly Chinese, and I'm making an effort, right, to connect with them in my 6:30 Mandarin, and I brushed up my Cantonese so that I sound more like my Hong Kong neighbors or whatever. And all of a sudden, they started to accept me more. So I don't know if times have changed, or that was like, smaller town versus bigger metropolitan. I have no idea. So yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah. To just add on top of that, because I have a very different experience compared with Christine in the same small town there, because I got immediately accepted. I got welcomed by the Hong Kong people, and then like Taiwanese people, and eventually got really involved in the Chinese Student Association back there as well. And then when I came to Toronto, come the opposite. Because probably I love downtown as well. I don't have a lot of people. I think downtown people just colder.
Now you have me.
Yes, we can get boba together. I don't even get to talk to my neighbor. I don't know who they are. I don't have that kind of sense of community in like living downtown Toronto.
But you know what? I think just hearing, Christine and Winshi, just hearing you guys sharing this, we can already tell just by ethnic Chinese, we live in different experiences just by being Chinese, growing up from different parts of the world, still being, ethnically Chinese. We still have different experiences. That just goes to show how diverse the experiences, the stories are, and we need to keep telling them. And just for me, just very quickly, just to wrap up this question, I guess. So I grew up in China. So coming here, I fully accept the fact that I am Chinese. Regardless if I ended up becoming a Canadian citizen or what's going down the road, I fully accept myself as a Chinese. But I think, talking about prejudice, it really comes to become a huge issue, the center of, anti-Asian racism since the pandemic. And I do think it doesn't only have an impact on actual Chinese individuals, but it also have an impact on a lot of East Asians and a lot of other Asian folks, even if they're not Chinese themselves, because a lot of the East Asian folks we look similar, at least to in the eyes of other people, we look similar. So we all became the target for a lot of attacks, violence, racism. So it's just so I just think it's time for us to come together and to push back, to really represent ourselves, to fight back, because this thing has an impact on all of us. It's not just for one ethnic group, it's for all of us.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely come together and look past our differences is the message here. So I'm gonna pivot back to the questions, and Winship, don't go, stay. So going back to your book, what challenges did you face when you were writing it? You were telling us about some of the research that you've done, and you ran into, difficulties. Why don't you share some of that with us?
Yeah. So last time we chatted about this was I had a challenge of finding enough resources and finding enough literatures about the interactions between Asian and other people of color and other racialized groups here in Canada. I think the majority of the literatures, history books, or textbooks, or even the stuff that I read back in college, they focus on how the minority group in relation to whiteness, so from a very Eurocentric perspective. But I have rarely read about anything, for example, about how Asian and Indigenous folks in Canada here interacted. I didn't even know that I had a cross paths before I started to write this book. So I came across this article, this research about how the Hong Kongese folks who came here back in the 19th and the 20th century for building the railroad in BC, how they interacted with the local residents, the Indigenous folks there, and they actually intermarried, they settled together, they created a whole community there in those places. And eventually, people moved to the urban cities. Eventually the railroad project was done, so a lot of people moved out. But there was definitely a history of them building a community together. So I just thought it was very important to inform ourselves, educate ourselves about that part of the history, because that just goes to show that we did have a cross path together. And from there, we can see what's down the road in the future. We can take lesson from what's happened in the past and to see how we can reconcile with Indigenous folks, how we can also support them to also build a future that's collaborative together. Yeah. And also, I just want to quickly mention another challenge was also to, knowing how diverse our group is. I was also constantly kind of like battling with myself. Who am I speaking for? Who can I speak for? Can I really speak for folks who, we talk about colorism, or maybe darker skin Asian, or people who are from a completely different social economic background? Can I speak for them? So that was kind of a challenge for me. Eventually, I kind of made peace with myself. I think I am telling my authentic story. And by that, I am not speaking for anyone else. I am telling my stories, but to also raise awareness about Asian issues, to also create a space or a conversation like this where we can talk about Asian issues. But it's really hard to figure out who am I really representing. So that was also part of my constant battle with myself.
Okay. Have you gotten, well, it sounds like you've gotten over it. And I think the message here is that you're just going to do you.
I'm just going to do me. I can only speak for myself. And hopefully there are folks that can resonate with me. And hopefully I create a space where it's safe for everyone to talk about these issues, to also be like, hey, I relate to this, or hey, this is something different that I experienced from you. And I welcome all of that. In the end of the day, the goal is really to create a space for us to talk about issues that impact us.
Yeah, speaking of safe space, when she recently shared something with me, it was a Red Table Talk. So I'm going to actually pull a question from Bisu May, and I want to focus on this part where she said, we see the Black attacking the Asian Filipino on the street in New York City recently. Why, and what's your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this?
This is a really, really great question. I think I also saw the same video that Bisu was talking about. So very, very unfortunately, I actually viewed a couple of videos, particularly showing that Black folks were attacking Asian folks. It seems like that was from the impact of the pandemic, or seeing Asian folks as a virus. And I have to say, at this very particular time, we need to see that there are very ignorant folks that are going to do very ignorant things. And the media sometimes pick on, racialized folks attacking each other, fighting against one another. But we have to remember at the same time, we do fight for our Asian empowerment of our own community, but we need to also realize the bigger picture is that we need to unite all people of color. There are always going to be ignorant folks doing things like this and choose violence rather than taking the higher ground, which is to really have a conversation, to build understanding. So when they go low, we got to go high. We got to understand our bigger picture here is unity, is allyship, is empowerment for all people of color. So those kind of stories, I have to say, very, very unfortunate. We do have to acknowledge the attacks, the violence that Asian folks are receiving, but also we need to realize we need to take the higher ground. We need to see how we can collaborate with other people, POC folks, how we can build understanding rather than, violence like this, aggression like this.
Wishy, what's your thought on this? Because you shared a really amazing clip with some of us.
Yeah, like that. I think one of the outcomes of the video that I got was from like, because media's been really harmful, or like because like they are mostly control like one group of people, and then they get to choose what narrative they want to display for the other audiences. So like if they purposely chose like blacks attacking Asians, and then it's just like trying to stir the pot. So like that would be how the other people are like seeing this issue. But like statistically, like blacks are not the only like people are attacking like our Asian elderlies. Like I think in that video they also show like police report on like how other groups like against other groups. I think we can also share that video in the comments later. But I think it's really worth check it out and just really like try to think a little bit more broader. That it's not like race against race, but it's more like we have to do our part on the education, like telling that like we are here to like have peace. We are not like promoting any violences.
Yeah, and also just wanted to quickly mention that let's also focus on another side of the story, which is, during Black Lives Matter, I've seen so many Asian folks really, standing up for the Black folks, because acknowledging the anti-Black racism, and also really did their self-reflection examination to see how we can address anti-Black racism in our community. And same as, the rally to support Asian folks. There are a lot of stop Asian hate, and a lot of these protest demonstrations, Black people were also part of them. And I have seen a lot of on social media like TikTok, Instagrams, a lot of Black activists. They were also fighting for Asian community. How about we also highlight those positive stories, the positive, to show a model, to show a great example of what it looks like to build allyship. So I think individual cases like this are really unfortunate and they're really saddening, but there is a better way to resolve this, which is allyship, which is empowerment for both of our communities.
Yeah, I do have to share, like after I went to Windsor, I did my grad school in Detroit. So I have to give a shout out to my two closest friends when I was in Detroit, Nefertari and Chris, and they're my Black sisters, and we shared and we learned a lot about each other. And one thing that I learned from the show on the Red Table Talk, which Winchi will share after the show in the comments, is that it is true that the Black folks probably felt that, okay, the Asians come in and then they take over our stores. They're running all of these hair supply stores, and they look at us as if we are going to steal something, and they just want to chase us out the store. I'm here to give you business. Why are you treating me like that? So those narratives, they do, they exist, and so I can see why incidents like those attacks do happen. But I want to say the expert that I have brought onto the show, his message was really, it's amazing. He said it was something that I took to heart, is that your personal experience does not color the entire picture for everyone. So, like you said, Vicky, we should elevate. When they go low, we gotta go high, right? So we gotta go and educate ourselves. We gotta build this partnership and relationship with everybody. I don't care what color you are, like cyan, magenta, pink. I don't care. So it's about extending that olive branch and help each other out.
Definitely. A lot of the conflicts, tension really comes from misunderstanding, because historically how segregated, how divided these two communities are. That's why they created this fear, because we don't know what the other group is going to do to us. We perceive them as a threat. But if we're really, as you said, you have Black friends, you have people, actually have a genuine relationship, friendship with them, then you will start to understand they're just like us. We are just like one another. And we can also build love, friendship, relationship with them as well. So once we overcome that misunderstanding, I think a lot of tensions and conflicts will just resolve or dissolve. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I can't believe it's already been 55 minutes since we started the show. It was only supposed to be 30 minutes, and this is such an amazing. It doesn't even feel like it. So just to wrap up here, what are your hopes and dreams post-pandemic?
I love this question. I think in the bigger picture, I do want to continue my activism to support our Asian community and to support other people of color community, to bridge all these people of color communities. That's a bigger picture. I'm going to continue to be doing that. And now that I met, amazing friends like you two, Wincy and Christine, I think that just gives me
and
much
all of
more.
Malaysian Association of Canada, all of Max friends.
Yes, now I've met so many people. I feel like we have a much more powerful, much stronger group that we can definitely do this together. And personally, I am going back to school for master or hopefully law school. So in that way, I think, back another degree, I think that would also, the word that you like to use, elevate myself to be more capable of speaking on these issues to make a bigger impact. So that's down the road.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, you are still campaigning for your book. So do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yes, definitely. So the campaign is actually on for another 8 days. The campaign is for me to create a momentum for the book, to showcase to my publisher that my book has the potential, has the capability to sell well. So if folks are interested in purchasing this book, it's so timely right now. It's only a week left till the end. So if you can pre-order right now, you will also be a part of my author community. Your name gets on the back of my acknowledgement recognition page. So you can see your name in the book, which is amazing. And so pre-order or donate, help me to get this book published. I think it's so timely for this book to come out, for more people, not just Asian people, to read about this and to raise awareness.
I think someone mentioned in the comments that like folks in the Asian country will be able to get a copy of the book, or is it just for North America?
Oh yeah, so international shipping is available. It's free shipping to Canada and China, because I was only able to pick 2 home countries in order to do free shipping. But international shipping is available all around the world. I will be personally mailing out these copies to you. Hopefully that'll make it even more special. And also ebook is available. So it's a cheaper option. It's much more convenient if you want to go for that route. That's also great.
So you mentioned China. The Bisu may mention, is the freedom of expression on media in China, Hong Kong, is that going to be something that is going to, hinder the sale of your book?
I really don't think so, because I think in the end of the day, this book is about it's delivering a positive message, and it's based on my story, my perspective, and the focus of this book is really not to promote any propaganda or any political view. It's simply coming from a very genuine and authentic place, from my experience, my story, and my thoughts on what's going on with the world, issues that impact us. So if anything, I only think it has a positive message to deliver. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So here's a plug. We're actually going to invite Vicky back in a few weeks. we are actually going to have an amazing forum to talk more about this topic about being Asian and what does it mean. So stay tuned, folks, for that event whereby we're going to have a panel. We're going to, unpack more of anti-Asian racism. We're going to be talking about what should you do, what have you experienced, and so on and so forth. So Vicky will be back in a little bit. And now that it's almost top of the hour, I want to thank Vicky very much for joining us at Malaysian Association of Canada and sharing your journey with us. It's been enlightening to hear your perspective as a young, angry Asian female.
Assertive as well.
Right, in Canada. And so to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. And this interview can be found on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, as well as website. So follow and subscribe us to stay updated with more exciting events that we have planned for the future. So thank you very much. Terima kasih and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. The pleasure is really mine. Thank you. 谢谢。
谢谢。